And welcome back to the Cover 3 podcast here on CBS Sports. I'm Tom Fernelli, and joining me today are two lovely gentlemen, William Bub Elliott and Daniel DK Cannell. Bub, DK, how are you on this fine Monday?
Is this the Masters version or is
Yes.
this the NPR version?
Yeah, I was curious.
Yeah.
I spent all weekend watching golf, and I was just sitting there like, I could do this. I could call a golf tournament. So this is my audition for the
Are you
Masters.
Are you gonna take any shots at the Live Tour like Jim Nance did with Brooks Koepka when he said
I will respect the
CW?
course. I will respect the event, unlike that disrespectful Jim Nance. But no, I think
The
you're like
CW.
it was a good.
That
joke.
was a great low key
Yes.
just shot that everybody picked up on. It was so good.
Jim Nance will not be calling Pac-12 games in the future if that's the case.
Wasn't that his last? Isn't he like focusing on NFL now? I think that might have been his last, wasn't it?
No, I think he's just
Just the
finishing with the
tournament?
Final Four. Yeah, he's still going to do the Masters in the NFL, I believe. I could be wrong. I'm
No,
wrong
I think
a
you're
lot.
right. I did see he was giving up a couple things, but I wouldn't give up the Masters. Are you kidding me? It'd be 85 and
Well-
on my deathbed if I was him.
I mean, look, Lundqvist gave up college football, right?
Mhm.
But still does the Masters.
Mhm.
And I thought he had a great TV moment back like 20-something years ago, either 03 or 04 during the NCAA tournament. CBS used to run these like made-for-TV movies, and maybe they still do. And I'm pretty sure it was him on the call or somebody even older than him. And he had to read a promo for like locusts or spring break shark attack or so, like something like that. And he was like, I think we had like a kind of a hot mic situation. I remember watching this in my dorm room. It's like,
Did you notice?
yeah, I'm sure that'll do well.
That's
Up
the
next,
point where
locusts.
you're like, yeah, you don't give a crap anymore.
Yeah.
Your give a crap meter is pretty low.
Tenure.
There was interesting yesterday. I did notice when he was on the call, there was a little bit of Darth Vader in it, like there was some breathing behind him. It was like, oh man. And I didn't notice it with that many other people, but yeah, he was excited, I
You
guess.
get those pimento cheese sandwiches, you kind of just gotta lose your breath a little bit.
Dude,
I was just thinking because they had all the coverage like all weekend on like masters.com and on Paramount Plus where they're doing like the featured groups, and like Shane Bacon is doing the announcing for the featured groups. Shane's great, but Shane and I used to blog together at Fan House like 15 years ago, and I'm sitting there thinking, man, if Shane can go to this where he's calling the Masters now, if he can go from lowly golf blogger to calling the Masters, why can't the Cover 3 just get like a couple holes? Like they have 4, 5, and 6 cam. They have the Amen corner cam. Obviously, your first couple of holes are important. Then 16, 17, and 18. Just give us like the 8th hole. The three of us, and Chip can join if he wants. Just calling the 8th hole all weekend long. The hole nobody cares about. It'll be fine.
if he wants. Chip would quit Cover 3 to call the Masters in an instant.
In a heartbeat. I might too.
So the weather was pretty bad this weekend,
Mhm.
but also the weather was bad for all these spring games we're going to talk about today. We're going to have to slow play some of this stuff like Patrick Cantley, because I'm not really sure we can fill an hour on just spring games.
Well, we could start by making fun of Texas A&M then, because speaking of slow players, Sam Bennett, the amateur who finished, he wasn't exactly moving quick himself, but there is the obvious joke that late August and September he was on top of the leaderboard, but then conference play rolled around in November and he just fell off at the end.
Dude,
It didn't. Well, then you get the story and you feel kind of bad making fun of that joke. Like it felt a little bit bad because it was such an unbelievable story
He had a
with
great
his
weekend.
dad as the inspiration and the tattoo he put on him. Did you see his so today he's playing in the Aggie Invitational. So he has to play 36 holes and he has to walk. And somebody said, "Are you back to carrying your own bag?" And he said, "Yeah, that's what you do in college golf." And then they followed up and they said, "Are you going to take a push cart?" And he said, "No, this isn't Stanford." So I guess he was taking some shots.
I like this guy then.
All right, Stanford
yeah.
Cardinal. Yeah, he's got a little swag to him.
Yeah, I like him too, because during the weekend and they were asking him about, like when he was at the top of the leaderboard, he was in second for a large portion of the weekend. And he's like, yeah, when I play my best golf, I can win this.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I love this kid.
Or when he said the place where he won the U.S. Amateur at Ridgewood,
It was more difficult.
Yeah. He's like, that course was tougher than this one.
Apparently-
getting an invite back.
Apparently that was true. Like a lot of these golf bloggers started talking, and they said like where the US Am or NCAA or whatever that was like crazy baked out that weekend, and it was just it was
Well,
impossible.
there's a lot of courses that are harder than Augusta. I mean, it's pretty wide open. You can blow your driver pretty much a lot. You can spray it a little bit, and you can still have a shot. It's all about the greens, and I think that's what happened. With the weather, they were worried about them. It slowed them down somewhat, so they didn't have as much teeth in them. But that's what everybody I've talked to, and I've been there and I've watched, but you don't get a feel to when you're playing it. But I think the greens are like the big, that's the big challenge with there and being in the right position. Like if you're not in the right side of the green, it's like you're hitting a 3-putt or a 4-putt potentially, which we saw John Rahm do in the first hole was a 4-putt.
So keeping this to college football, this is kind of like I mentioned this in the text thread this morning. The Masters was kind of like the college football playoff this year. Brooks Koepka coming back from the Live Tour, which, by the way, the Live Tour guys did pretty well overall. But Brooks Koepka comes back, the Cinderella run, in first after the third round, kind of like TCU. Nobody saw it coming. But then you get to that 15th game, that final of the title game, and the wheels come off because you ran into Georgia's John Rahm and just got absolutely blown out of the water at the end there. But there was some college football news that did happen this weekend that we should probably get to before we also discuss the spring games. One of the biggest stories of the weekend was recruiting-wise. A kid with an awesome name, Noland, a 4-star quarterback, committed to Ohio State. So finally, Ohio State has another talented quarterback on its roster to throw to its talented receivers. Bud, what can you tell us about Noland?
Noland, so 6'3", $195, 4-star quarterback for us in the 2024 class. 24/7 Sports has him as the 55th rated player and the number 7 quarterback. I think we talked an episode or maybe a week ago about this is not quite as good of a quarterback class as we had last year, right? It's probably a little bit better than what we had 2 cycles ago. Lefty, really quick release.
Oh, he's a lefty?
Yeah, he's a lefty.
I love lefty quarterbacks.
Me too.
Gets the ball
so nicely.
Like he gets the ball out on time. He's really accurate. 8,000 yards so far in his high school career with his senior year. Still left to play. Pretty decisive, experienced guy. A good athlete. He does run the 100 and the 200. Like not amazing times, but I think it still says something that your quarterback there is running track. Now, he's 28-3 as a starter, which is generally a good indication. Like we want your high school quarterback to, if you're a stud, to be able to kind of will your team to victory. That you can overcome a lot of things. I think maybe to kind of tamp down expectations on that slightly. Last year, his team, Langston Hughes, sent guys to Ohio State, Georgia, Auburn, Miami, Middle Tennessee, Toledo, FAMU, and a couple other FCS schools. And
so
this year,
a decent roster.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, yes, you are putting up insane numbers. 8,000 yards with your senior year still to go is nuts, and 28-3 is obviously nuts. But he is playing on one of the most loaded rosters in the state of Georgia. His tight end last year, Jelani Thurman, went to Ohio State. Pretty nice athlete, and like, why would you not want to commit to Ohio State given what they've been doing receiver recruiting wise with Brian Hartline? They have Jeremiah Smith, who we think is one of the best receivers coming along in a long time. Last year, they got, 3 of the top 7, I think, in the country. So pretty nice get for those guys.
So he played at the Ohio State of high schools? That's basically what you're telling me. Because that's how you could have taken out his name and described CJ Stroud with the talent that's around him and why he's going to be. And I think it is one of those things that it is tough to evaluate, but I'd probably be more concerned if he was going to, a mid-tier Big Ten school as opposed to Ohio State. This is very much, and we're starting to see this cycle of quarterbacks come through where it does feel like plug and play. As long as you kind of execute the offense, you're going to have top-tier talent to spread it around to, where I think you should see more of the same type of production out of him.
No doubt about it. He also had an interesting quote that he gave to Steve Wilfong. I don't know if you guys saw this or not, but his quote was, they develop black quarterbacks into NFL caliber quarterbacks. So I got to thinking about this because their finalists were, he had like 6 finalists, but most in the industry agree it came down to A&M and Miami. And so I was like, look, Jimbo has a pretty good track record developing black quarterbacks as well. Damian Craig, E.J. Manuel, Jameis Winston. Ohio State's just, and I guess Cristobal's offense, not really, right? But that's not, that's not to imply like that they can't or won't, just they don't have the track record of it. Ohio State recently, though, I mean, Haskins, right?
Mhm.
JT Barrett, Justin Fields, CJ Stroud. I don't hear this talked about quite as much anymore. Like I remember when Jameis was coming out, it was definitely a thing. Like if you go to Alabama, will you play? And since then, obviously,
Mhm.
Alabama's had several black quarterbacks who've done really well. But prior to that, they didn't have a huge history of playing black quarterbacks. I don't hear this talked about as much anymore. So it was interesting that it still mattered to Aaron Noland, and certainly something Ohio State was able to capitalize on here.
I mean, I definitely think it's something they could sell. But I also think,
Yes.
like, you mentioned the guys that Jimbo's had. Was the last black quarterback he developed, obviously first pick. Pretty good job, won a national title with him. But how old was Aaron Noland when that happened? Because that was what,
Right.
2013? So he was probably 8 years old.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
so
he was first pick in the 2015 draft. So yeah, he was probably 8 or 9. Yeah.
God, that blows my mind when I think about that, how old the recruits were, just the stuff that was not even long ago, just like recent college football stuff. It's like, yeah, Jameis Winston won a national title at Florida State. That was like a couple years ago. It's like, no, it was a decade ago. These kids were still in third grade. They didn't care.
Do you think it was so this one it's kind of like a sign of our society today where every single discussion we have has to resolve around race, and I think you'd be foolish to think that the recruiting game didn't come into this. Do you think this was a something that he was looking for or something that Ohio State was selling?
See,
Because I think, and kudos, I mean, if you're Ohio State, why wouldn't you capitalize on it? But I think you'd be crazy to think that it doesn't come up in conversations with families. But at some point, like there's a laundry list. Was Tennessee in his group? I thought I saw Tennessee had on the table. There was like 6.
There were
Had
6
something on
that
the
they weren't
table.
really considered like a true finalist. It was pretty much
Right.
Miami A&M and Ohio State. Some people thought it was really just Miami and Ohio State.
Right.
Tennessee has a kid from South Georgia already committed to them now.
I just think that's one where I feel like Ohio State sold him on that. And I would too if I was them, right? You've got a really good track record of having black quarterbacks elevate and go to the next level. But I don't know.
I
To
just
me, it
think
seems like
it's
recruiting tactic.
Yeah,
agreed.
I think it's probably more recruiting, but I also think that like kind of like you were getting to, but it's like to me at this point, it's like, well, yeah, like look at the Heisman winners. Like I don't think there's been a shortage of very good black quarterbacks at the college level moving to the NFL. I think that's just the way the sport is moving.
Mm-hmm.
But
Like,
else,
do you guys think that was something that, I mean, I think, I don't know, 20 years ago, that was probably a legitimate worry,
It was
like
very long
going
time.
somewhere where like as a black quarterback, you'd have a real shot to compete for the job.
And we're going to switch you positions.
Yeah,
I
don't
we're
know
going to
if
move you
he's
to
smart
receiver.
enough to play the position
Yeah.
and that kind of crap. Yeah,
I-
no, it's.
I guess like, I don't know. I kind of think of college football a little bit as, I don't know what the term you want to use, like post-racial or something like that, but like not really, like not having a major impact on the decision of who's going to start at the quarterback, or at least I'd hope.
I that's one of the things I liked and loved about playing the sport of football or playing athletics in general is they all feel like the ultimate meritocracy, right? Like the best player is going to play regardless of race. But I think now it's even more so open to different things. And I think probably before the question for the NFL came along so long because you didn't see him, and the NFL had a different style of quarterback. But now that the NFL has taken concepts and looked at the success of black quarterbacks and said, wait a second, we could have, RPOs run and we can have systems run and look at the success they've had in college, where now you can see it have success. And now I don't even think it's a thought anymore for teams when they're evaluating at all.
I agree.
Speaking of evaluating, and spring football is a time for maybe trying some new things. Another little under the radar kind of story coming out of spring practice this weekend. Harold Perkins, who was one of the most impressive freshmen in the country last year at LSU, will all remember the game he had against Arkansas, in which it was one of those rare instances where a defensive player just kind of takes over a game and practically wins it by himself for his team. Dominant, not dominant, but he had the ability to be a dominant edge rusher last year at times. He was playing at Mike in spring practice this week. Is LSU seriously considering taking one of their best edge presences and moving him inside?
I saw this note, and our Chris Hummer dropped in our 24/7 Sports Slack, and that he and Trey Scott kind of comped it to like Micah Parsons, right? It was like, okay, in Dallas, he pretty much is a tear off the edge. And I think that's probably a pretty good comp in some ways for Perkins. But I also, on the other hand, I think Matt House is an excellent defensive coordinator for LSU. Like they loved him at Kentucky. That the Chiefs liked him a lot, apparently. Like I think that's a really good hire by Brian Kelly. And he has to be seeing something in there. I do recall like reading, reacting, shedding blocks in the run game was occasionally a problem for Perkins. A&M ran him over. Like he was not really a factor in that game late in the year. So I'm not going to sit here and be like, look, I'm on a podcast. He's working with these guys every day in practice, but it's kind of eyebrow raising, right?
Like yeah, when I saw it in the notes, I was like, huh?
Yeah.
Doesn't make much sense to me. Like you take a guy like that who could do what he does off the edge, and it's why would I want to take him off the ball? Why would I want to take him off the line of scrimmage? And maybe, you know what? Maybe he's just so damn talented that wherever you put him, he's going to be making plays. But I just feel like value-wise, I would rather have that talent on the edge than in the middle of the field.
I mean, if you're him too, if you're the player, I mean, I just read an article the other day that was talking about are linebackers the new running back as far as draftability. You know, like they're letting like if you're Harold Perkins, you're probably like, wait a second, where's my value biggest? And like credit to him for being whatever's good for the team. And he's already showcased the ability to rush the passer. So maybe that's there. I think it could be a sign of great things for LSU potentially if they have the depth to move somebody like that around and say, hey, we're not going to lose that much production. That could be a great thing for LSU if they're thinking about moving a player like that to another position. Maybe it's a weakness at middle linebacker too, but if you feel comfortable moving him, I mean, that I think could be a good sign for LSU.
Yeah, no, linebacker, as far as the draft is concerned, is definitely becoming like off-ball linebacker. Edge guys are still good the same, but like the middle guys that's definitely becoming a kind of running back position. Because I look at I know there were the injury problems last year, but look at Kobe Dean. Like that is a guy who not very long ago would have probably been a top 15 pick at worst, and that he was sliding into the second round. It's just
Devin Lloyd was incredible at Utah. He slid late first, I think. I mean, they just don't take a middle linebacker high. It's not a position.
The more analytical NFL front offices become, like the first round has just become a selection of quarterbacks, receivers, offensive linemen, defensive linemen, edge rushers, and corners. And that is really it. Linebackers and running backs, you can get off. Tight ends, if you're truly special, they'll probably work you in early, but they also feel like a lot of those guys, they can get in the second, third round. Like we've talked about it with Ryan Wilson last week on the show. This tight end class is seen as really deep, but you're probably not going to see a bunch of them go in the first round. You might see one or two go late first, but other than that, teams are probably going to wait because value-wise, there are just better positions to have on rookie deals than there are others. So, coming up, that's enough draft talk. We did have spring games this weekend. So coming up on the other side, we're going to break down some of the spring games that took place. Auburn, NC State, Vanderbilt, and more next.
You need to know what you're getting into. This is not cops and robbers. The enemy is everywhere, but he can't be seen.
Why me? None of this makes sense.
It's a mind game, John.
What have you gotten me into?
I can't tell the difference between what's real and what's not.
All right, back here on Cover 3. There were spring games this weekend, and one of them, gentlemen, just disgusted me. Absolutely disgusted me. The Auburn spring game, big deal. Hugh Freeze's first game as coach, spring game. The format was the defense started with a 24-0 lead, and then, typical spring game shenanigans with weird scoring rules and all that kind of stuff. But the point was, after the game, the winning team was going to get steak, and the losing team was going to get hot dogs, and the score finished 24-24. What the hell? This is what we're doing.
Did everybody get them?
Did everybody wins? Everybody's going to get a participation trophy for playing in the spring game. What's going on?
You have to have like a one play winner takes all.
Yes.
Something. I mean, you got, even if the field goal kickers come out there and they both have to kick, until one misses, you got to have some sort of delineation. You can't have everybody win.
Do like a 4th and goal from the 5 or something. Just have it settled. You can't have this, it's a tie. Yay, everybody gets steak or hot dogs. Yay.
What's the midline here between hot dogs and steak? Like A burger, but not a great burger? A good burger?
Like an overcooked burger.
Yeah, like a medium well burger. Where it's like, okay.
All right.
Unless
it's
you guys
fine,
get a
I
medium
can eat
well,
it.
then apologies.
No, medium rare guy here.
Yeah.
All day, every day. Danny.
Medium, straight
Okay.
medium.
All right.
Okay, that's fine.
That's fair.
Kobe beef burger.
I couldn't do a
Kobe beef
podcast,
burger.
but if I found out you were a well done guy, I just couldn't keep doing the show. It would just
No, it annoys me. My wife orders my kids well done. Like she's worried about them being undercooked. And I always tell her, I'm like, you're ruining these kids.
You gotta toughen them up.
Thank you.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. But when I make them, like my son likes them, and when Maggie makes them, he's like, these aren't juicy. I'm like, yeah, because you nuked them. Like, this is.
So, anyways, Auburn's game finishes 24-24. Lame. But was there anything that stood out? We look at the quarterbacks. Now, we should mention, wasn't the best weather. Like all that rain rolling through Augusta, Auburn's not too far from the west. They were getting most of that same weather system. So it wasn't great for passing. The quarterbacks weren't spectacular. They went a combined 5 for 12 for 60 yards. Robbie Ashford went 1 for 3, 39 yards. Holden Garriner was 3 for 5, 17. TJ Finley 1 for 4 for 4 yards, and he ran 3 times for 13. I mean, do we need to be concerned about any of this, or is it just like the weather killed this game?
Okay, so in watching this, I didn't think there was a real opportunity to shine, but even like adjusted for the weather, this passing offense did not look good. Like it has a long way to go if this team is going to have like a potentially 500 record in conference. Now, I did see more of what they did towards the end of Auburn last year, where they just ran the heck out of Robbie Ashford. He ran a bunch of zone reads. That is something that Hugh Freeze quarterbacks typically will do. They'll run a lot of zone read stuff. I kind of liked the offensive line here. Honestly,
Yeah.
I thought Dylan Wade was a really good pickup from Tulsa for these dudes. He was a guy that, like, I noticed a real drop off when he got hurt in like mid-October when he was playing for Tulsa. And the Jones kid they got at center from East Carolina is a pretty good player. So I think Auburn probably better on the O-line. What did we say about these guys last year, though, when it came to receivers?
Wasn't great.
I'm
one of
not
the
seeing
worst in the
anything better so far.
Yeah.
Like, these guys ain't scaring anybody in the SEC. They're going to need to hit the portal hard for receivers and maybe for a quarterback, but they got to find some receivers in the portal.
And there's always the chance for that, because after the spring games end, we typically see the second wave of guys hitting the portal who have a better idea of where they are on the depth chart. But do you think at least part of the appeal of Hugh Freeze is maybe you don't have the 4-star, 5-star spectacular wide receiver room, but a coach who offensively can possibly scheme these guys open?
Yeah, especially if the run game's there. I think so. Like that was encouraging to see how well they ran the ball at times, and I think the offensive line was better. Also, not quite so sure that Auburn has the same level of like D-line that they have had for about the past quarter century or so, right? They may need a year or two to get that back up to snuff, but yeah, like Hugh Freeze does have a track record of scheming guys just WTFO, right?
Mm-hmm.
So almost any receiver can do that if it's just on scheme.
4 out of the 5 linemen, offensive linemen on the depth chart are transfers, either JUCO or somewhere prior playing experience. I mean, we've seen this work other places to turn around a roster quickly, but I thought the offensive line was pretty impressive too. I do think it was such like you got wind, you have rain, and it's just and cold. Like to me, I look at a pass game and those are like the worst combination. You'd rather have snow without wind. Like just the combination of all of them make it pretty much impossible. I mean, it looked miserable. My guy Chris Doring out there interviewing Hugh Freeze just looked like it was an absolute just mess. So I don't think you take too much from that one, but I thought the offensive line ran it pretty well.
Enemy of the podcast, Avery Jones, apparently played pretty well. The center transfer from East Carolina. Good for him. Very happy. Good job, Avery. Moving on.
Do you think Ashford's the guy? I mean, there were some interesting comments from Finley after where he was talking about, hey, if they bring in another transfer, I'm out of here. Like, I don't know. Finley, like accountability has to be something. Reliability has to be somebody. And somebody who, take some time off during the season. I know mental health is at the top of everybody's mind and it's important, but you do have to be available for your teammates. I wonder if they will go with some of that more run-based stuff, kind of like when you envision what Malik Willis was doing at Liberty with Hugh Freeze, if that's kind of the offense that they go with.
If he was going to transfer, like if he's like, hey, I'm out, like, do you think Auburn would help him pack his bags?
Right.
Because I think he's not been he's been a below average quarterback for almost the entirety of his career at Auburn. And he had a couple nice moments at LSU. I don't know that Auburn would be freaking out if he were going to leave. I think the real question is like, who can you go get in the portal?
Yeah. So that's more interesting.
You might have to wait and see in May, right?
Well, yeah,
see
for sure.
See who enters. Because right now,
or you're back channeling it now,
right?
If you're smart.
I mean, I know the weather's, but even if the weather was nice, the quarterback position was a problem for Auburn last year, and there's really been no clear cut kind of like, weren't they in on Grayson McCall, and then that fell through?
Yeah.
So I mean, they've clearly been interested in finding somebody to come in to compete for that job, if not just take that job. So I think we're probably going to see them active in the portal once the post-spring wave hits.
Let's say something positive about Auburn.
Okay.
Keldrick Falk is a true freshman defensive lineman who was committed to Florida State for a long time. Hugh Freeze gets in there, kind of demonstrates just the difficulty everybody has recruiting the state of Alabama. If you're not Auburn or Alabama, right? Like you can do a great job on these guys for 51 weeks and then boom, Auburn turns up the heat on you, new coach. And like, oh, I've always wanted to play for Auburn. I'm flipping, right? I thought he flashed and looked really good. Big bodied kid. Like he'll be like a 6'4", 6'5", 280, dude who can stay on the edge, but would play with some real power, shock you, and has enough burst to be a special guy. He was highly rated and looked the part.
Okay, so now that we said something nice, bottom line, post-spring hot take, need an answer now. Will Auburn be a basketball school for one more year, or is there reason to be excited about this football team this fall?
Who do they have in the non-con?
I think they're 6-6, 7-5.
Like,
So
yeah, they're
I
a
guess
bowl
that's
team, right? Like,
Yeah, I think they're a bowl team, but that's okay. That's a step in the right direction.
Yeah.
Like let's bring some stability and start. And then I think you got to get you got to get recruiting cycle, more transfers, let them spend some money.
Oh,
But I think
guys,
this is
they get one of their SEC road games is Vandy this year. So they're going to go 4-0 in the non-con. I mean, UMass, Cal, Samford, New Mexico State.
So there's a chance we could have a nice, fun fall if we're Auburn fans.
They'll be somewhere between like
they'll be 3-0.
Worst case 4-8, best case 9-3. I know that's a wide error bar, but like you have a new coach, we don't know what the quarterback's going to be.
They'll be 3-0, but there's also a very good chance they'll be 3-3 by the time we hit mid-October, because after those first 3 games of the year, they're at Texas A&M, home to Georgia, bye, and then at LSU. So like that is a very rough entrance into conference play.
Yeah.
I think their games that are like the most intriguing and what'll determine their season are like those like Mississippi State, Arkansas,
Ole Miss on the
Mhm.
plains.
Yeah, like those 3 games are going to determine like if this year's a success or not, right? Like I don't think anybody's going to think they beat LSU, Alabama. Like if you did, it'd be incredible. But those other ones will be like how the season's judged as a success.
And the good news is like right after that Arkansas game on November 11th, if it's not going well, that is probably when basketball season starts up. So, I mean, it's all falling into place for Auburn fans. Moving over.
What's the longest Auburn's had to be a basketball program?
Oh God, I don't see. That's the thing. They've only just
school.
become a basketball school. Like this is not. I don't. As far as I know, they don't really have like Charles Barkley was a long time ago. Like, you know what I mean? There was a very long kind of dead period, but they have joined since the SEC kind of had this little basketball renaissance where they just had all that extra money and nowhere to put it. So let's put it in basketball. Auburn has been one of the better programs in the country. So yeah, I think Auburn basketball will probably be better than Auburn football next season, but we could be wrong. Speaking of basketball, let's move to the ACC. NC State also played in the same kind of wet weather conditions, but unlike Auburn, NC State went back in time to the Hurricane game against Notre Dame and said, let's just chuck the ball all over the place in this rain and wind and see what happens. Like you got in the notes here, bud. Brennan Armstrong threw the ball 28 times in the first half. He ended up, oh, wow. And then MJ Morris also, but what was going on? Like, was it just the weather or were they just not looking very good? Because this is a new offense. Robert and I's coming in. Tim Beck is left to take over the Coastal Carolina job. You've got a new coordinator, not only calling plays, but kind of installing a brand new offense. You bring in Brendan Armstrong, who is familiar with it from his time under a night at Virginia. Was this like just the weather, or was this also like just weather and spring, kind of everybody getting to know each other stuff?
I think there's some of both. So you had some weather impacted throws. You had some throws that were just off target from both guys. MJ Morris did have a really long completion, but other than that was generally not super effective. Armstrong at one point was 10 of 21 for 95. So that's really not great. You want to be a little higher on the yards per attempt. Yeah. So that was not particularly good. I think,
but I think that's Robert and I in a nutshell, though. Like, even doesn't matter. Like, we're throwing the ball. That's how we move the ball. So if you do get conditions like this, that's where you can get into some trouble.
I would be a little bit worried about the NC State receivers, right? So Pack Pride, our 24/7 Sports NC State site, does a great job covering NC State, and they were like reading their recaps. I agree. It was like, okay, yeah, like didn't seem like anybody really important was missing for them. So like these are the dudes, and these dudes don't look like dudes. So that's kind of problematic. They had some drops. They had some routes that they ran wrong, and the Pack Pride says like they're definitely going to need to hit the transfer portal for receivers after this. I guess in fairness, NC State kind of sneakily has one of the best corner duos in the country, right? Shaheem Battle and Aiden White are good players. Like I don't know what round they're going to go in, but like they'll play pro ball. I'm fairly certain. So that's tough to get open against, but yeah, work in progress for sure for NC State.
Do you think this is truly a quarterback competition, or is this a let's make sure Morris doesn't leave?
I think it's probably a competition, because you do think you have something in Morris. So if he can be close, then I mean, where's Armstrong going to go? Right? Is he going to just quit if he doesn't win the job?
No, he'll stick around, but that's why I think it's his job, because he's got so much experience in this system. He's had so much success in it. He came there to play. Not to say that doesn't guarantee him the job, but I just wonder if they're stringing this out to make sure Morris doesn't leave.
I think that's a fair question. But like, you wanted to frame it as a competition. Do you want it to be this close, I guess? Possibly. Maybe that's good, actually, that Armstrong didn't blow him out of the water, because that way Morris won't hit the portal this spring.
Yeah.
And I think ideally you bring in Brennan Armstrong because you want somebody who knows the offense. So he's got to have a head start on it just from that aspect alone. Like MJ Morris is still learning this. Armstrong knows it. So he should have an advantage. And like you're saying, the fact that he didn't have a huge advantage might have been the weather, might be the receivers, might just be that the competition is actually open and they don't really have to fake it because Armstrong's not running away with it. But my gut is saying that when the season starts and NC State's first game of the year is against UConn on the road at what the hell, ACC? Why are you anyway?
They're playing at the Rent.
Yeah, why are you scheduling road games against UConn?
It's got to be one of those 2-for-1s, right? Because they don't want to actually pay the money, so like they go do a 2-for-1, so they don't have to do.
You are a Power 5 conference. Act like it. Just Jesus. Anyways.
The teams that don't do this are the teams that I think want to get out of the league.
NC State can lose that game. I was going to say that should be an easy win, but like they can lose that game on the road at the
last year. They should have lost to East Carolina. Remember, they almost lost that game. There was a missed field goal, I believe, right?
Oh man, wow! Their road schedule has like the least intimidating environments in the league. By the way, like UConn, I know the Rent. Okay. Virginia, Duke, Wake, and then Vatech. So like Vatech is somewhat intimidating.
But even then, by that point, although that could be senior day for Vatech. So
yeah,
I was gonna say by that point of the season, they might be checked out. But if it's senior day, it'll probably be pretty raucous. But no, it's just, I don't know. that's now I'm just all mad about the scheduling. I hate the ACC for that. It is so damn stupid. All right. Well, while we're on the subject, time for the post-spring hot take. NC State, based on what we saw this spring in the spring game, where are they going to go? What's the record? 8-4 or better or worse?
Ooh, that's a really good question.
Let me check the schedule.
They have Notre Dame in the non-conference,
Mhm.
right? Which is
VMI.
typically difficult. Marshall at home, at UConn, right? So non-con is most likely 3-1. Like we would say,
Yeah.
probably. So you're going to get 3 there. Can you go 5-3 in the league? So they host Louisville. They're at UVA. They're at Duke. They host Clemson. They host Miami. They're at Wake. They're at Vatech. They host North Carolina.
Man,
8-4 is a good season for these guys, I think, in this year.
that back
8-4 is
half
what
of the,
they've been every year, like the last 3 years. 8-4.
the back half of that schedule is tricky as hell, though, because like you
Yeah.
get the bye after the Duke game, then you get Clemson and Miami in back-to-back weeks, and we'll say what we want about Miami being disappointing all the time, but physically that's going to be a tough game, especially the week after playing Clemson. And then you're going on the road to Wake, which Sam Hartman's gone, but I'm pretty sure it's probably still going to be Wake Forest. It's still going to be a good team that's on the road. Ooh, that could be tricky. So then you've got Virginia Tech on senior day, and then you finish with the home rivalry game against North Carolina. That back half of the season might be tough. Like it's going to be very interesting.
Well, that's one of those ones that will be such like ACC scheduling, either like, and they could all be crappy, and it's like, hey, NC State's 8 or 9 win team again, or they could turn things around, or you could see them all beating each other up, and they're all about 7-5.
I do think the real key game for them is Louisville, because I would project you to lose to the Irish, who I'm fairly high on this year. Hear that, Notre Dame fans? Fairly high on you guys this year. Just want to let you know. But if you get the Louisville game, then there's a pretty good chance that you start 5-1, and then you go to Duke, which and you get a bye week. So then you're potentially 6-1 if things go well for you, coming off a bye week, and you get Clemson for a homecoming. That's not an easy place to play. And then you get Miami the weekend after. I like that place when NC State is good is a really hard place to play. I think it's, as an ACC guy, like it's sneakily louder than like Virginia Tech. Right. It when it's good. I've been in both. I think NC State is noticeably louder. But if things don't go well, you don't have a lot of easy home games. Almost all your home games down the stretch are really tough, and your road games are are losable if things are not going well. For sure.
All right, moving on back to the SEC, to another program near and dear to our hearts here at the Cover 3 podcast. Vanderbilt held its spring game over the weekend, and I saw something just absolutely disgusting at this game, just terrifying. From the exclusive footage from Haley Simmons's Instagram account, as the Vanderbilt players were walking onto the field, there were some young girls. One of them was holding a thing of cotton candy that was probably bigger than she was, and one of the Vanderbilt players snatched a piece of the cotton candy from her as he walked by, literally stealing candy from a child. What kind of program are you running there, Clark?
I mean, but if I'm Clark Lee, I'm like, hey, look, that's family atmosphere, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
If our player wants to eat some of the cotton candy from Barton's daughter, I mean, that's family.
Barton should make him run laps for that. I don't care. But anyways, as far as the actual game was concerned, what did we see? What did we like? What are we concerned about?
All right. I watched as much as I could of this. AJ Swan, I think, is still your QB1. They liked him last year. Didn't seem like he made any kind of big jump, but nobody else really is somebody who I think would take his spot. They still have, I think, Ken Seals for depth, right? Mm-hmm. One of the major worries I had for this team was that they lost Ray Davis to transfer. And I thought he was a really good back in the league, but shout out Barton. This true freshman they got, Cedric Alexander, he's got some real juice to him, man. This is a guy that I think Vanderbilt fans should be pretty excited about. I think he has a decent chance to be their starter. Ran 11.4 as a junior in high school, 5'9", 200. That's not bad, man.
What did you see? Like the
I
offense?
did not get to catch it.
What? You were in
I know. I was
Philadelphia.
in
Your
Philly
daughter
at the volleyball tournament. Watched a lot of volleyball.
All right.
Family atmosphere. That's what we wanted.
Yeah.
He was paying attention to his family.
O-line, like I didn't really, I don't know, man. Like you got a lot of those guys back and they didn't really blow me away. So that's a little bit concerning because you're going to face better D-lines than you're going to face in the SEC than you will just in Vanderbilt's spring game. But maybe that's part of what made Alexander look good, right? Was that some of the stuff he created on his own. So that was encouraging. I think they might have hit on this kid, Aeneas Tecosmo, defensive end from Stanford in the transfer portal. It's so hard to take transfers. Look, it's like academic school and academic school violence here. I mean, this is, that's pretty wild. So,
At least they'll take them though. Stanford won't take anybody, right?
No.
Yeah. And I think Vanderbilt somewhat plays ball with graduate transfers, whereas Stanford like kicks their own graduates out because they're like, oh no, we're not helping you get into grad school here. Just bad.
All right. So bottom line, hit me with the take. Vanderbilt last year. What was their win total last year? 3.5 or 2.5?
I thought it was 2.5.
All right. We're going to bump it up to year 2.
Because they were over by October, right?
Yeah, they damn right they were. We're going to set it at 3.5. We want progress. Are we going over or under based on what we saw Saturday? Nothing else, just based on what we saw in the spring.
Oh, over.
Daniel.
But not by a lot, but I think over.
I mean, they could start 2-0, like easy, because they've got Hawaii, which, they won last year in Honolulu. It's in Nashville this year. You got Alabama A&M the week after that. At Wake, tricky road trip. Wake's a very good program. Then you got UNLV on the road at Allegiant Stadium. I think that should be a Vandy win. So I'm thinking we're entering conference play with a 3-1 record. And then the question becomes, how many SEC games do they win?
Right. They got to get one to get to 4.
They'll get another one.
Yeah,
I
think
agree.
they will too. Because look, you get Auburn at home, you get Missouri at home, you get Kentucky at home. I don't think you're going to beat Ole Miss. Georgia's one of their road games, which if you're Vandy, you absolutely want to play them on the road. Tennessee's one of their road games. South Carolina, if you like them, that probably matters that they're one of their road games. They do have to go to the Swamp. They beat the Gators last year in Nashville, so Florida will be out for that big revenge game. So I think over. I mean, they'll probably hang this number at 4 or 4.5 juiced under, if I had to guess. And he's come out in about 2 to 3 weeks.
I'll take the over. Here, let's put the screws to him. Can Vandy, not saying will, can Vandy realistically get to a bowl game in 2023?
Yeah. I mean, they won't be favored to, but yes.
I mean, you look at, I agree. Now I feel bad. I don't want to put that much pressure on them, but like starting with Kentucky and Mizzou at home in SEC play, Kentucky, I expect will be better this year in a weird way, even though they lose, their first round quarterback. But I don't think they're unbeatable by any stretch. I don't think Mizzou is unbeatable by any stretch. So this is a team that could be, it's not unrealistic to think they'll be 5-1 by the time October hits. They'll be over by October.
If you are good enough to expect a sweep of UNLV, Alabama A&M, and Hawaii,
which they should,
yes, then your odds of getting 3 more out of Vanderbilt, Kentucky, Missouri, I guess we put Florida in there until proven otherwise. Host Auburn.
You can get South Carolina.
At Ole Miss, at South Carolina the week before, or I guess that's not the week before they play Clemson because there's probably a bye there.
How do we know they're not 4-0?
We don't. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I
the
put Wake in
Forest
that
game,
second
I think
category.
Wake Forest doesn't get better defensively. You could see them push them
kinda
around,
shootout-y.
run the football.
Yeah.
Oh man, Wake's gonna win the SEC, or Vandy's gonna win the SEC. Heard it here first. I covered 3. All right, let's hit the break. After the break, there were other spring games that were played this weekend. We'll hit some few notes, and coming up next.
Get breaking news,
Big news coming out of the NFL today.
highlights, and instant reactions.
The largest final round comeback in tour championship history. We're down to the final 4.
I just want to take time to analyze greatness.
Talk winners and losers with a guy who's already a big winner.
CBS Sports HQ. It's all sports all day long.
All right, back here. Before we get to the other spring games, there was another question we had earlier, and I'm sorry, I'm not used to this hosting thing, so I forgot to put it on there. But it's from Freeze Camp 55. If Vandy was in a different or easier Power 5 conference, how would they stack up to that league? Would they be middle of the road ACC team, for example? Yeah.
Middle of the road, like in the ACC, it's a 14-team league. So, like, what are we defining that as? Like middle 4 teams, middle 6 teams?
I look at it as
not Clemson, Florida
Yeah.
State,
like if
Miami.
look at the success Duke and Wake are having in the ACC.
Yeah.
There's no reason Vandy wouldn't do the same.
Pasted Vandy last year.
It did, but I'm saying
In Nashville.
Well, yeah, but Vandy was in a situation where they're starting over, whereas Wake is kind of an established program with Dave Clawson there for a while. I just think that if you put this program in the long run in the ACC, I don't see any reason why they couldn't be, because unlike the SEC, the ACC has a lot more kind of smaller private schools. In the SEC, Vandy's the only one.
Wouldn't they be like Duke? Couldn't you see them being just like Duke? You know, up and down. If they get the right, they could be an 8-win team. Every once in a while, maybe, Duke has made the ACC championship game, in years where some teams were bad. But I think they'd be the equivalent to Duke. They'd have better resources than Duke. That's for sure. Like if they had, that's the thing. If they went to the ACC, they lose a lot of the money that they have coming in, which has helped them get to this level.
Agree with that. You may get more fan support if you're not losing games all the time too. So like we shouldn't necessarily assume that they're always going to, like the stands will always look like they often do. I would sort of have them in that like bottom 4 range, but not like consistently the bottom 1. Like for the vast majority of all of our lifetimes, Vanderbilt has been the worst team in the SEC, literally like the worst team, and almost always by like an order of magnitude worse than the next team. So it would also depend on what they do with their non-conference schedule. A lot of the ACC teams schedule really good teams in the non-conference, like at least a guaranteed loss per year for many of these guys. So if they're one of these silly teams that does that and they get the Notre Dame in the non-conference thing, then like a 2-10, 3-9 is very much on the table still for them if they were to be in the ACC. Like, are they better than like if they're in the Big Ten? Do they have better results than like a Rutgers or Northwestern?
Yeah, I think they're better than Rutgers. I think everybody's better than Rutgers.
Yeah, aren't they? I mean, you hate to like pin them because they're so similar, but I think they could be like Northwestern again, a team that's played for the Big Ten championship and they've made bowls, but then, if things go off the rails, they could be a 3-win team.
And you also, it's even just like down to the fact that, they're in a city, just like Northwestern is just outside of a large city. They're small private schools. I think there's a lot of similarities.
Like for some teams, making a bowl is how we define success. I within the current confines of the SEC schedule, I think being in a bowl hunt in November should define success for Vanderbilt. Like I think putting the bar at make a bowl is maybe too high, depending on the non-conference schedule. But anything that requires you to go 3-5 in the SEC is a really big challenge historically for the Commodores.
What did James Franklin? He had them at 9 wins. They won a bowl game.
Yeah. But if we talk about like control your own destiny teams or teams that like really benefit from, like I put together a little graphic on my Twitter over the weekend. I was like, hey, the team that probably should win the SEC, Georgia. The 2 teams that definitely could if they play up to their potential, Alabama and LSU. 2 teams that need the above teams to get hurt and play to their potential, A&M and Tennessee. Everybody else, no shot for the league. Like, and I think I got very little pushback on that except for some delusional, I think, Auburn and Florida fans. So, like,
way, delusional Auburn and Florida fans.
Yeah. So, if you think about it, like, Franklin did a tremendous job at Vanderbilt. Maximize what they could do internally and also caught a lot of good scheduling breaks. Like you need both to go 8-4, 9-3 at Vanderbilt. Like let's not kid ourselves. You have to be the best damn version of Vanderbilt you can be. And you need some other teams to be just off the rails. Like Mark Richt was not maximizing Georgia at the time. Florida was clearly not maximizing at the time. South Carolina was a bit of a mess for part of the time and really good for the other time. Missouri had not been in the league yet, or they just got there?
They were just there.
Just there. Okay.
I believe.
Tennessee had like a million head coaches in the span of 10 years, so they were not exactly the picture of stability. at the time.
Well, here's another one for us here. Maybe a topic for the this is from Don Trado. Maybe a topic for the guys to discuss is Hugh Freeze pushing for spring games to be against other in-state schools, or at very least have a multi-scrimmage. This is an idea I've seen floated a lot this spring. Would doing this keep Danny from going to Philadelphia for his daughter's volleyball tournament and at home watching spring games?
Yes, let's go. Makes the whole difference. I've been saying this for a while. It always gets received really well from the fans. I think spring games are stale. I think they could use an infusion of life, but I definitely think there are some significant roadblocks to it. I thought it was great too. The reception you had from Summerall at Troy was like, "Yep, I'll do it." Trent Dilfer was like, "When? Like, get me there tomorrow. I'll do it." I do wonder though, like, if the discussions got much deeper, if it would actually come to fruition. I think it's a great idea. I would love to see it. I think you could have the money there, the resource. I think TV networks would love it. I think the SEC network, ACC network, ESPN, they would love to air them. It'd be good exposure. But it just feels like there could be some red tape issues. Like if you let one SEC team do it, do you have to let them all do it? Or do you make them all do it? Same with the ACC.
Also, would Hugh let the game end in a tie?
My idea has always been, because I get there's travel issues, is to have the Power 5 school play the closest, even low, not group of 5 school, but like an HBCU, like Florida State could play Florida A&M. You could have Florida play Bethune-Cookman. It's less than an hour away. Like Alabama plays Alabama A&M, and you could try to tie them in with HBCUs. And then it's really good exposure for both of them. And then you could you could still pay the schools. You could give them the gate. You could give them part of the TV deal, because I think you could sign a TV deal, whether it was streaming, whatever the suggestion was. I think you could sell it. I think for a pretty good number. And I think the players would love it. Just speaking from a player standpoint, like, you hate going against the same guys. I mean, by the time the spring game rolls around, you're giving audibles, and the defense is like, watch the slant and go, here it comes, or they just, watch the weak side toss. They know your terminology. So from that standpoint, you get to go against different scheme, different talent. I just think it'd be a ton of fun.
I was doing Cole Kubelik and McElroy's show the other day, and they asked me about this, and I was like, in theory, I kind of like it, but also to Danny's point about logistics, that there are a lot of complications. Like, how do you split the gate receipts? Do you have to pay Troy to come? Like, what about Troy fans? Like, do they enjoy going to their home stadium and tailgating, once in off season? What about your recruiting weekend that you might have at Troy that weekend? Like, are you getting kids on campus there? You're giving that up. Not to say that, like, obviously I was a huge Troy supporter this year and bet them all the time. So not to say that they play dirty, but they play hard. And it makes you wonder, like, would Auburn players give a damn about playing Troy? Because I know that Troy players would.
Yes.
They would really care. And, like, are they going a little bit harder than your Auburn guys are going in a spring game? You know what I'm saying? Like, that to me is something that is kind of important to think about. So if you're Auburn, do you care about losing a spring game to Troy? Because Auburn and all these other teams, they hold a lot of guys out for the spring game. I bet you those Troy guys are willing to play through a little bit of injury to show out against a Power 5 team. If Auburn runs out kind of a skeleton squad and Troy wins at Auburn, does that impact Auburn? Do they care?
You could, but basically you could do it just like we do now, where they're not real games, they're glorified practices. Sure. And, you keep score some funky way where it's like, hey, this isn't a real game. Because I think the other thing is, what if a coach is on the hot seat? He's had 3 years where he's, and then all of a sudden you lose your spring game to a smaller school. Oh my, like you talk about a rough off season. So I think there's some ways you could finagle that just like we do now. Like, there's not a real winner. You get points. And it's just all it is a glorified practice. Like, you don't have to have it a game with a kickoff. It's just, and you could even do 7-on-7. Like, you do a couple days of practice, or do one big day of practice, and it culminates with an audience that gets to watch, a crowd, and televised.
Would you be opposed to FCS?
No.
because then it's like a real scrimmage. Like you're not going to lose to an FCS team, most likely. Right?
Do we get to replace regular season games against FCS programs if that's the case?
That was my suggestion all along to the people that said, what about the FCS? When you said, I don't want them to play in the regular season game, put them in the spring. I mean, they did it with COVID. They tried to do their whole season, you know?
I would be open to that, but I would be 100% against games against other FBS programs. Not because I'm worried about injuries or any of that stuff, just because if we make spring games a bigger deal, we run the risk of I'm not able to watch the Masters one weekend because I've got to cover Auburn versus Troy in a spring game. Just 100% honesty.
Yeah.
If you're an FCS program, you're really relying on that. Like, I don't know whatever Auburn pays their FCS school that comes in September, but it's probably like 750, 700
at least. Yeah.
Like that. Most of the FCS schools, I think, are not getting $1 million. Like if you want if you want an FBS school, it's usually going to cost you over $1 million. What are you paying for the spring game? Like if you're an FCS school and Auburn's like, hey, here's $100K, you're gonna be like, I can't do that. Right. Not going to work.
The other issue too, and this is like, I know Sumrall and Dilfer were like, yeah, sign us up. But like, if you have like a young true freshman who balls out, you don't think, Saban or Hugh Freeze can be like, hey, young man, what a great game you had, man. That was great. Like, let's stay in touch. I mean, that's the other thing you would worry about. I think if you're the smaller school is getting your best player potentially poached that no one knows about yet. They would see that player and potentially all of a sudden it's on their radar. Like that's a reality of where we are today too.
Yeah, I hadn't considered that would suck.
Right. I mean, you got
every
FCS
FCS player just looking at this like this is my chance. This is my chance to get out of
a non-compete. Like you need to sign like a non-compete for a year. Like you can't take them right after the game. You have to wait a full year.
All right. There were other spring games that went on this week, and we'll go over them pretty quickly. Maybe not spend as much time because we hate these schools. We just want to confirm that if we're talking about your team's,
we just like ratings.
Yeah, we don't like you. We don't like your school. We don't like your family. We don't like any of you. Kansas. Michael Swain, you wrote at the Fog. He had some great updates for us this weekend from Kansas's spring game, which is probably the first time in a while a Kansas fan has been legitimately excited to see a spring game because they're coming off a good season.
Exactly. So I did not get to watch this. Two big takeaways here from Mike's article at the Fog, which is, just an awesome Kansas site. Number one, defensive end and pass rush look like it could be a major problem. He noted that they struck out on several transfer targets before getting Patrick Joyner, and Joyner apparently arrived with some sort of injury thing that's still plaguing him, kind of helped a slow start there. So they may really have some problems. And offensive line should continue to get better. Kansas O-line last year I thought was well coached and played maybe above its talent level. So that's good to see for sure. On the offensive line part, the no pass rush is obviously concerning.
Yeah, especially in that conference. Yeah. What did you see or what have you read about some Group of 5 spring games? Because I know there was some at UNLV, Boise, Trent Dilfer's first game at UAB. Any notes on those games to share?
Were we really high on the idea to fire Marcus Arroyo? Like, I'm not really sure he was the best coach, but I was like, are we upgrading that much?
Yeah, it was kind of like, what were you expecting from to get? But
did you see the quarterback numbers?
Decisions. I did. I saw the notes. I did not want to spoil it, but I think you and I intercepted a pass.
Yeah,
we spring game.
Tom, nice pick on that.
Thank you.
Good return. I'll block for you. You block for me. We'll run it back 6 times. So 6 picks. Doug Brumfield, who was the starter last year for the most part, they all kind of had injuries last year, with the exception of, I think, Harrison Bailey, who just wasn't very effective. 6 of 16 for 102 picks. Harrison Bailey actually had a nice day. 10 of 18 for $169 and 1. I don't know how to say this kid's name. Jaden Maeva, whatever it is.
Maeva is what I would
Maeva. Okay. 11 of 21, $151, 3 picks. Cam Friel, 0 for 3. So no picks.
No picks.
No yards. That's not a great stat line by most standards,
Does going 0 for 3 but not throwing an interception move you up the depth chart of this game?
It's 58 passes for 400 yards and 6 picks is some very infant stages Kentucky tries to run the air raid type stat line there. They got a 5'7" receiver who's pretty fun. Jacob DeJesus, 10 catches for $136 and touchdown, 5'7". So we'll see.
Jacob of Jesus having a big game on Easter weekend. Who could have seen it coming?
Can we talk about, because it's noon now, can we talk about some really just bad quarterback play throughout the day? All right. Taylor Green, I think, is still a starter at Boise. Still dynamic, still erratic. 9 of 20, $176. That's a good yards per attempt. It's not a great completion percentage. If you give me, what is that? 8.5 yards per attempt. If you give me that in the legs, I don't really care about the completion percentage within a reason. UAB, Trent Dilfer is a QB guru. Not really guruing yet, I would say, so far. 19 for 28 for Jacob Zeno for $179, so not great. Obviously, everybody in the South had pretty significant weather issues over the weekend. I did not get to watch that one. East Carolina, Garcia threw 29 passes for 151 yards and 2 picks. He's the best of the starters, apparently, and their offensive line is having some problems. I am a little skeptical.
Jones gone.
Yeah, right.
Enemy of the pod.
Louisiana, I was going to watch a game and did not because both their top quarterbacks were out. So didn't really feel like I'd learn a lot from that. Also, I'd like to at least acknowledge my family over Easter. Yeah. And the receiver Smith, who transferred to UTEP or to A&M from UTEP, he was not going to win a starting job there because they have 3 pretty good receivers there in College Station, and he's transferring back to UTEP. So that's actually pretty good news for UTEP.
Good news for the Miners.
Yeah. That's really all I got. Unless I missed something, maybe the comments will tell us.
I guarantee you that is more notes than any other college football podcast will have about spring games this weekend, which is why we are the best college football podcast going. There is absolutely no need to listen to anybody else. And you know what? People are saying it. I'm a better host than Chip. Everybody in the chat's been saying it all show. Chip, this is what you got. You got Wally Pipp, bro. Sorry. Deal with it. No, we miss you. Please come back. So yeah, Danny's already gone. So for Bud Elliott, you can follow him at Bud_Elliott3, correct?
Yep.
There we go.
No underscore. Excuse me. Just
Bud Elliott 3. Chip's the one with the underscore.
Yep.
You can follow me at Tom Fernelli. Bud, thank you very much. And John Cena, who followed me on Twitter this morning. Big fan of the show, I guess. Thanks for that.
Look at that. John Cena.
See you on Wednesday, everybody.